Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Wilson, joined by Blake Toppmeyer, both of us of the Knoxville News Sentinel. We are here at Neyland Stadium, where Tennessee just completed a really bad regular season with a 34-13 loss to Texas A&M. Blake, during Jeremy Pruitt's postgame press conference, he was asked if he is confident that he will be the Tennessee coach moving forward. The first part of that comment was, yeah, I think absolutely. Kind of dove into talking about a young roster, some games last year they won that were close, and kind of suggested that 6-game winning streak was maybe people bought into it more than they did, and maybe the regression wasn't as major this year. But what do we make about those overall comments from Jeremy Pruitt about his future at Tennessee?
It was interesting because he did undermine last season's success a little bit. I think unintentionally. I don't think that was his goal by saying that, but I think what his point was, there's oftentimes not a lot of difference between winning games and losing games. But I think the problem with that thought is that for Tennessee this year, there was a big difference between winning games and losing games. It's not like it was losing a bunch of games by a field goal or a touchdown. It was losing games by double digits. In fact, all of Tennessee's losses this year come by double digits. So, in Tennessee's case, there was a big difference between winning and losing games, and you didn't see a ton of improvement in this team throughout the year. I thought we saw a little bit, in that Auburn game, Florida, Vanderbilt, not a ton, but a little bit. But today was just sort of hitting on a lot of the themes that plagued this season. And it's leaving Pruitt answering questions about his job security. He said he thinks he's back next year. Of course, that's probably what he's going to say. I don't know that he's going to say, I think I'm gone. But it's interesting because university decision makers could put an end to this speculation. At any point in the last week, they could have, going into the early signing period, said, Jeremy Pruitt is our coach. He's going to be our coach next year. Disappointing season, but Pruitt's the guy in 2021, and that hasn't happened.
Yeah, Blake, I mean, those themes we're talking about with Tennessee, I mean, poor offense, held to almost under 200 yards today until the final drive there, I believe. Bad defense, just getting gashed left and right. Did have an interception today, but that was one of only 2 drives that Texas A&M didn't score on. What do we make of a season where it's basically a 10-game sample size of the same exact team with the same exact problems? You just don't see those strides being made. Quarterback change happens. A lot of different things fluctuate. Defensive line coach gets fired. Jeremy Pruitt takes over. Still not a lot of improvement there. How do you evaluate a season with such little improvement and change?
It's interesting because if you think about it, I think Pruitt would like some of this season to be pinned on the pandemic. That would be good for him, as if this is kind of counted as a tough year in a pandemic. It affected the team, et cetera. But when you look at the way the season unfolded, Tennessee started this year 2-0. The time the pandemic affected them most was in the preseason. It did affect their ability to practice and navigate through a preseason as they normally would, but they started 2-0. And then they started playing their worst football in the middle of the season. And, it took a long time for Tennessee to make a quarterback change. And then when they did make a change, I think that provided a little more intrigue to fans that were tired of watching Jarrett Garantano, but it didn't jumpstart the offense in any real discernible way. The defense, it was kind of a middle-of-the-pack defense if you look in terms of yardage allowed, but they also were very poor at forcing turnovers, among the worst in the SEC, so they really didn't help their cause in that way. You mentioned getting gashed over the middle of the field. That was a problem week after week. And you really look at it, there's not a lot of stars anywhere on this roster, but I think it's really noticeable on defense. I mean, there's really no one on that defense that scares the opponent. There's no Monty Rice in the middle of that defense. There's no ball hawking defender in the back end of that defense. Frankly, there's no stars that look like they're ready to step forward in 2021. I mean, Henry To'oTo'o would have been the guy that you would have thought would have been the linchpin of this defense, and I guess he was. But this really wasn't a big sophomore campaign for him, and that's where Jeremy Pruitt hangs his hat, is on defense, and we didn't really see that this year.
You mentioned Jarek Guarantano did come out after Tennessee's loss, say that Guarantano's entered the transfer portal. I think that was kind of a foregone conclusion that Guarantano either would explore professional options or a sixth year somewhere else, given that the NCAA has approved kind of a blanket waiver this year as a free year of eligibility for everyone due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's obviously noteworthy as a 32-game starter here is out the door, as I think we all expected. But Tennessee could have one more game, however, a bowl game. Blake, what do we expect there? Do we expect Tennessee to accept a bowl bid? And what is gained this year with a bowl berth, given that a normal year you get a lot of extra practice time, but obviously that window is cut down this season?
I'm not sure much is gained. You mentioned that in a normal year, coaches do talk about those extra weeks of bowl practice. Number one, I would point out that, well, that didn't really do Tennessee a lot of good last year. They got those extra weeks of bowl practices and they went 3-7 this season. So I think sometimes that's overblown. And then two, you're not going to get extra weeks of practice this year. You're going to get an extra week, maybe a week and a couple days, because of the delayed start to this season. There's not as big of a gap between the end of the season and the bowl game. Really, I don't sense a lot of excitement from Tennessee about playing in a bowl game. I asked Alontae Taylor, cornerback, after the game, what he would think about a bowl bid. He said, quote, "If they give us a bowl game, I'd just say we'll be ready to play." Jeremy Pruitt said, quote, "We're preparing like we're going to be in a bowl game. If we're not, we're not." This doesn't sound like a group that's really thrilled about playing in a bowl game, and understandably so. This has been a tough season, a disappointing season. From the SEC's perspective, they need teams with losing records to accept a bowl bid if they're going to fill all of their slots. So I could see the motivation from the SEC's point of view. But really for Tennessee is an extra 5 practices going to make the difference in solving the problems in this program? I don't think it makes a lot of difference one way or the other. I guess the one thing you could say is it's another opportunity to look at Harrison Bailey and JT Shrout and see, maybe if one of those two guys gives you a quarterback of the future. From what we've seen from them the last 3 weeks, I'm not sure that either one of them is the surefire quarterback of the future. We've seen some redeemable moments, but neither one of them has really been able to put it all together. Today, Harrison Bailey, 2 fumbles, didn't have a lot of great presence in the pocket, held the ball too long at times. JT Shrout showed off his big arm with that touchdown pass to Cedric Tillman, but he also showed the inconsistency that we've known him to have, even in the little time that we've seen him throughout his career. So I guess that's the one thing, if they play in a bowl game, is it is another data point to look at the quarterbacks and maybe see if they can get something figured out there heading into the spring.
And unfortunately, a bowl game would also extend what Tennessee, I think, would like to put behind it in terms of the season, just a wildly unforgettable season for Tennessee. Thank you for reading, watching these videos throughout the season, and stay tuned to Go Vols Extra and KnoxNews for all the coverage of Tennessee football, basketball, Lady Vols, and more.